What up, data nerds? I'm Luke, and welcome to my channel where I make data visualization easy. In this video today, we're going to be going over list comprehension, and that's just a fancy way of using for loops in a more concise manner to make lists. And it's not just limited to lists, we can do tuples, sets, and dictionaries as well, but it's just a more concise way to write your code. So for today, we're going to be focusing on three parts, if you will. So the first part is focusing on just on list comprehension. What is the layout of it? From there, we move into other comprehension methods, how we can do it with tuples, sets, and dictionaries. And then finally, we wrap it up with a third thing with using if statements within a list comprehension to make it just a little bit more complex. At the end of this, we're going to wrap it up all together and we're going to do a practice problem where we go into the Office data set that has all the different scripts and lines of all the actors and what seasons they were in. We're going to make it to where you can input an actor's name and get out what the seasons they were a part of using set comprehension. So with that, let's jump right into the computer. So here we are in my Mac with VS Code launched and a Jupyter notebook running. And the first one, as we discussed, will be that we're going to be talking about is list comprehension. So to understand list comprehension, let's have a quick recap of for loops on how you would do this with just a for loop and not using that comprehension. So focus on this top line of code. First, you would need to create an empty list. Then from there, you would use the for loop to iterate through an iterable. And then we'd use, in this case, since it's a list, we'd use the append method to a list to do some sort of output expression. So you could put that from the iterable inside of here. So you would do this method to actually create the list. Now moving on to actual list comprehension, you can see this is much more concise code that we're accomplishing. One line of code versus 3 lines of code. And for this, very similar layout, except now you don't have to create an empty list and you don't have to do this append method. So what you have is you first list the output expression, so what you're wanting to go into the list. And then from there you put the for loop, and that's what you're cycling through. So for, iter, and iterable. So let's look at an example of a for loop and then for list comprehension. So let's say for the for loop first, we're going to do the same example. We want to get a list of 0 to 100. How will we do that? So for the for loop first, we'd have to, like we said, we'd have to create a blank list. Then we'd have to create a for loop to cycle through. We want to go through 100, so we'd use this range 100 function. And then from there, we want to append that to numbers. So numbers.append, and we would want to append number to that list. And then if we go and actually print this, so numbers, shift enter, we can see, hey, we have this list of 100 numbers. So let's do this now with list comprehension. So remember, similar syntax, we want to start with our output expression. So we want to start with number. And remember that's going to be a self-defined variable within here. And then we'd do the for loop. So for number in range 100 and doing shift enter, hey, we get the same list of 100 numbers. Next, let's get into modifying that output expression. We'll do it for loops again, and then we'll compare it to list comprehension. And remember, so we have an output expression here. Before we were just putting the iter inside of the output expression, but I want to show that you can actually put different things in here. So let's say we wanted the numbers were appended, but we want to have 0 through 100, but squared. So we could do number and squared within our for loop. And then whenever we do shift enter, right here. And so then when we do shift enter, we can see, hey, these are all the different values that we have for being squared. And so let's do similar with the list comprehension. So similar here, right, that we have our output expression on the beginning. So I would just put number squared at the beginning, still doing the for number in range 100, do shift enter. And then, here it is. So it's all the values are now squared within this list. Now let's look at comprehension for other objects. So we're not just limited to lists. We can also do tuples, sets and dictionaries. And just to remember, recall that tuples, why would you want to use tuples? Well, tuples are immutable. So if you wanted some sort of list, if you will, that you can't change, you'd use that for sets. This is more of unique values and unordered, and that's why we're going to be using this in the final practice problem. So make sure you take note of this. And then dictionary would be used to have some sort of key and value pairs. And so for the tuple and set comprehension, very similar structure to the list comprehension, except you're changing the outer characters. So instead of brackets for list, tuple is going to be parentheses. For set, it's going to be these curly brackets, and so on for a dictionary. So for tuple comprehension, let's say we wanted to get a list of values for whenever we go from 0 to 10, and we'd want to divide it by 2, and we want to get the remainder, and we want to see what this would look like. So for this, similar as before, right, we would do number, and we want the remainder, so we're using this modulus operator. So number modulus 2 for number in, we'll just do range 10. And we do shift enter. So one thing to note about tuple comprehension compared to these other ones, this is actually a special case, and it's not necessarily included within Python, but all you have to do to convert this generator object into a tuple is put tuple outside of here. And that's just using the built-in tuple function. So pressing shift enter, hey, we get what we would expect to see. We get the remainders as we go through the number range, divide it by 2. What is the remainder? 0, 1, 0, 1. Moving on to set comprehension, we're going to be doing the same example here, but with a set instead. And like before, we want to get the remainder of going from 0 to 10 and dividing it by 2, seeing what the remainder is. And recall, right, from above, the tuples, it had a lot of repeat values in it. And remember, tuples are immutable. Sets, however, we can change them. And the thing with sets that are great is they only provide unique values. So in this, we would get the values that didn't have any repeats. So whenever I run this, shift enter, I'm getting only the unique values, which if we look at the tuple above, it's a bunch of zeros and ones. For the set, it's just 0 and 1. Now moving into dictionary comprehension. So very similar structure, and we're going to be using the same example as before. We want to use the modulus operator to get the remainder. And let's say we wanted to have as the key, we wanted to have that number from that num in range 10 as the key, and then for the value, we would have what the remainder is. And so the special portion of this for dictionary comprehension is you put your output expression up here, and then you have this colon in between it to signify that key and value. And then you just, as before, you just cycle through some for loop. So running shift enter, we can see and get the results, and now we have a key to see what the value is associated with it. So let's take the dictionary comprehension a step further, and this is a problem I'll run into frequently with data analysis, is I'll have two different lists, and they're ordered in the same manner that they coordinate with. So in this case, I have two lists here, names and roles. Michael, the first one, is associated with the first role of regional manager. Pam's associated with receptionist, and so on. But I want to make a dictionary out of it where I have names as the keys and roles as the values. So how would I do that with dictionary comprehension? So for this, since I have two different lists, I would use the built-in function from Python, zip. And if I write this zip names and roles and press shift enter, I get this zip object. I want to see it, and so I'll convert this into a list. So I'll put this in parentheses, shift enter, and then now we can see for this we convert it into a list, but it's a list of tuples. So you have your Michael and your regional manager, Pam, receptionist, and so on. Okay, so now we understand what the contents are of this zip. Let's apply this to a dictionary comprehension case. So this is what the dictionary comprehension would then look like. We want to have name as the key and role as the value. And then from there, we would do for name role in zip names roles. And recall, right, this for loop portion right here is going to be going through. We have two different objects that we're placing within it, and that's because it's going to be cycling through each one of these tuples individually. So the first one that it gets to is going to be Michael Regional Manager. It'll assign Michael to name, Regional Manager to role, and then from there we can put it into the dictionary itself. So let's actually run this, Shift Enter. Bam, we can see with the curly braces now on the outside of it, we have this, the key as the names, and then the value as the role. So let's move into the third and final part for this in understanding list comprehension, and that's using conditions within it. Specifically, we're going to look at if we include an if statement. So for the list comprehension, we're going to have the same structure with an add-on. So we still start with our output expression. From there, we can put in our for loop that we're going to iterate through. And then we tack on an if statement. So to evaluate a certain condition, and that will filter out the list. So let's look at a for loop first. Okay, so here's the for loop. Remember that we had before where we were generating a list from 0 to 100. But now let's say we only want those values that are even. So whenever you divide it by 2, the remainder is 0. How would you go about doing that? So for this, what we'd have to do is we'd cycle through all the numbers in the range, and then from there, we'd have to add a statement within it. So if number and the modulus of 2 is equal to 0, if we meet this condition, i.e. the number is even, from there, we'd want to append the number. If it wasn't, then we wouldn't append the number. So actually running Shift Enter, we can see, hey, we get the list of even numbers. So now let's do the same thing, but with list comprehension. So remember, we start with the output expression, and then for number in range 100, because we're gonna go through the net, and then it's gonna be do an if condition. So if number modulus 2 is equal to 0, i.e. the number is even, we want to insert it into the list. Pressing Shift Enter, we get the list with just even numbers. Moving on to the application of what we just learned. So for the application, as previously described, we want to display the seasons an actor was a part of in the office based on user input. And for this, we have a data set already. And what it is in the CSV, which I have loaded in Excel. But what it does is it puts in all the different lines that the speaker or actor has. And then from there, it also has things like the season that this was part of, the episode, and also the scene. For this, we really just care about column C, so the episode that it was part of, and then column F, the speaker. So we need to, one, get the contents of this in there, and then from there do the comprehension method to get the data that we want. So looking at the approach that we're going to be taking for this, we're going to first start with, we want to read the contents of the CSV. From there, recall that we're going to have in that CSV file, we have a bunch of repeat values within it because we're going to have a bunch of names associated with seasons that are going to get repeated over and over again. So for this, we're going to want to use set comprehension. So we're going to use set comprehension to develop this values that we want. From there, we're going to work into just fine-tuning it further. We want it to where we can have user input. So we'll be using the input function for people to put in different names and try out things to see what seasons they are a part of. So let's start coding. So let's read the contents of the CSV file first. So for this, we're going to need to import the CSV module, which is part of Python standard library. From there, we want to open this file. So we'll say, hey, CSV file equal to open using the Python built-in function open, and I'll place the location of this file. And just so you can see, we have within our repository right here, we have a folder for the office data and then the scripts of the office, and that's what we're accessing to open. And then, as always, good practice, whenever you open a file, you want to close it. So we'll use the close method. And we're just gonna run this to see if we have any errors, and Shift Enter, so no errors. Okay, so now what we open the file, we need to read the file. So from here, we'll say, hey, CSV reader is equal to, so we'll use this CSV module dot reader. And then from there, we will put in the file, so CSV file. And to see the contents of what's going on here, we'll just do a CSV reader print statement within there and do Shift Enter. And yeah, it's a reader object. And just to show that we can iterate through this reader object, so we could say, hey, for a row in CSV reader, I want to print the row, and then I want to break because I want to stop after the first 4 iteration. And if you were following along for the last episode, we're on the similar path here. We have all of the different items from the first line within the CSV. So looking at the first line right here, that's what we're getting right here. So remember, we had said previously, hey, we want to know the season, and we want to know the speaker itself. And just to reiterate, right? So season 1, we can see just for Michael alone, Michael is appearing multiple times with season 1 associated. So that's why we're gonna be using set comprehension for this. But to just keep on building on this, right? We need to get the columns from this sheet itself. So for this, we need the season column and we need the speaker column. And remember, Python is indexed by 0. So we need 0, 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need rows 1 and 5. So just printing this to the, printing this below to actually see that we're getting the right things. We're gonna put row 1 and row 5. And yep, we get season and speaker. Okay, so now let's go about building this set comprehension to get this value. For the time being, I don't need this for loop, but I just want to keep it just in case. So I'm going to comment it out. If I press Shift, Alt, and A, I can comment multiple lines. So let's get into building this set comprehension. And just as a model to use, we're going to have, this is what the model I would expect the set comprehension to have, right? You have your output expression, the for statement, and then your if condition. So we're going to go through now and build a set comprehension based on this model. So I start with our curly brackets. And then remember, we want for the output expression, remember we have row 1 and row 5. We want the season in this set comprehension. So we're going to use row 1. And then we're going to do for row in CSV reader. So similar to what we did above to cycle through. And we want to do it if, remember the user is going to input an actor name. So we're going to say if row 5, which is the actor name, is equal to actor name. And so actor name hasn't been defined yet, and I did the wrong equal sign. Remember, we need to evaluates. So I need to define an actor name, and I'll just define that up above here. So we'll say actor name. And for the time being, we'll just give it to Michael. Okay, so just to recap, right? We're pulling out the seasons. So row 1, we cycle through each of the rows in the CSV reader. And then as we're doing that, we're looking at that row 5 column to see what the name is and seeing that it makes sure that it matches the actor name that we want. And we're using a set, so it's not going to have any duplicates. And I need to actually output it. So I want to do print. I want to print this. We do a Shift Enter. We can see, hey, this is the set for the seasons that Michael was a part of. And so for this, we can see this is the seasons that Michael was a part of, and it's not organized, but it has all the different seasons, no duplicates, and you can see, hey, season 8, he wasn't part of season 8. So instead of just hard coding this name in here, let's change this to the built-in function input. And then from there, have a statement for users to input the name that they want to use. Okay, so now we have that in here. And then let's make this a little bit prettier. So this will be seasons equal to this. We'll send it to the variable. And then from there, I want to print something. So I want it to print, I want it to print the actor's name that we input and what seasons they're a part of. Okay, so now we have it in here. We have just a recap, right? We have it to where the user can input the name. From there, we read inside of the file. And then we use list comprehension to comprehend this. And I'm gonna go ahead, I don't need this anymore, and I don't need this comment block. So I'm gonna just simplify my code. And yeah, actor's name. And then from there, it prints the actor name that they input, appeared in seasons, and then it prints out the seasons as a set. So let's evaluate this. We'll do Shift Enter. Oh, and yep. So I need to have a comma right here, and we'll do Shift Enter. Okay, and it says, hey, name an actor to see what seasons they're a part of. And fun fact, Warren Buffett was actually on the show, so we can do Warren Buffett. And we see, hey, Warren Buffett appeared in seasons 7. And then, yeah, just to double check that all the data is there, we can do Shift Enter again. And let's just say we wanted to see something like Jim. So we'll do Jim, Shift Enter, and see, hey, Jim appeared in these seasons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Bam, so there you have it. That is list comprehension and tuple and dictionary comprehension in a nutshell. Just to reiterate, if you're new to Python, feel free to keep on using the for statements, but I would slowly try to integrate this list comprehension to make your code more concise, and therefore you're less prone to have errors. For the next episode, we're going to be going into functions. So understanding what functions are, how they are used, and then from there, automating some of the tasks of extracting the data from the Office data set. So as always, if you found this video useful, smash that like button. If you're following along in this video series, consider subscribing. And then finally, comment down below on things that you may have questions on with list comprehension or ways that you're using list comprehension within your data analysis projects. So with that, I'll see you in the next episode.